Awesome. I'm excited to welcome Laura Bedoya, a senior technical support manager at Vitally.io, where she built and leads the company's first ever technical support team for a B2B platform, which is super cool. So excited to have you, Laura.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate the invite.
We were just briefly talking about how we're both East Coasters, and as a New Jersey native, I have like a special place in my heart for people who live out there or in Boston. So this is especially exciting for me. So Laura, one of the things that I'd love to kind of talk about is this, building the first support team. I have built some of those teams myself, not on the support side, but on sales or go-to-market. And it's really tough. I imagine that you experienced a lot, both helping people come on and building process. Tell us some of the questions. Some of the lessons that you learned in those early days building this out.
Yeah. I mean, it was a lot of fun. Just because it's just a lot of creativity, really. It's just kind of like, let's try this. Let's do it this way. This is what I know. Let's see how we can make it better. But yeah, I started at Vitally. I've been it'll almost be 3 years in February. So coming very close to I feel like 3 years in a tech startup is like 10 years in like any other company. But it was really cool. I was the first technical support manager and technical support specialist, and pretty much just anything that came with the job of being in technical support. So it was cool that I got to actually experience like what the day-to-day was going to be. So then when I brought on people, I could actually be like, this is definitely what you're going to be doing throughout your day, because I did it for the last 6 months by myself. Learned a lot about intercom, a lot about intercom. It's one thing to implement it, but it's another thing. I always call it my adopted child, because I didn't implement it or anything. And so it was just kind of given to me. And then I was like, okay, what did you guys do? How is this set up? What is not set up? Like, I'm still learning 3 years later, so many things about intercom that I didn't realize was turned on. It's been a lot of different lessons, but I think the biggest lesson for me is literally documenting every single little thing. And so for us, having just like a really big internal documentation helps every single person on board very easily, because as soon as I started a process, I would document it, and then whoever was onboarded, whoever the next person was that was new to our team, was able to actually be like, oh, okay, this is what you're doing. This is why you're doing it. This is how you're doing it, and all that. And, a shameless plug-in, we use Zight to pretty much just create all of our screenshots and GIFs and screen recordings and everything for our documentation. We're big fans of text, but also visuals. Everyone has different learning styles. And because we're also are in charge of documentation on the external side, we need to be adaptable to different learning styles. And, maybe reading a bunch of words step by step is not your thing. And you're like, wait, crap, where am I? What step am I on? Like, maybe you're just seeing a video, you go, oh, I know what that looks like. Cool. Like, let me just click around. So yeah, documentation, I think, is probably the biggest thing that I learned. And it helped also just keep me accountable and on track of like, what did I do? How did I do this? When did I do this? So it's been super helpful.
Yeah, I love how you have that kind of like, I don't know if you call it like a multimodal or, multi type of content. But for me, outside of work, I love Reddit, and I use it as a resource to read about people's experiences. And then I go to YouTube to watch how people build things. Like for Christmas for my kids, I'm going to build them like a swing set, and I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm going to watch somebody else do it and figure it out. Going back to your comment about having software or tools or even people, I feel like that's a pretty common experience. When you kind of adopted that tool, Intercom, did you feel like you were a true parent, or did you feel like you had to leave it how it was? Did you kind of start to make changes and just sort of make it your own?
No, I first observed and was just like, okay, what is happening right now? What is working? What is not working? So it was a lot of just question asking and observing and trying to figure out what exists today. And, I mean, I was I think the 28th hire, if I'm not, or maybe, yeah, I think it was like something like that. I can't remember exact number, but I was brought on really, really early on. And so there was no handbook, like there was nothing. It was just like, here you go, learn it, create processes, do what you can. And so it was just a lot of like, all right, let's click around and see like what you guys got turned on and how you are powering this. And like, I just learned recently that most like where our data is coming from. I thought it was coming from one platform and ended up coming from another one. So I was like, oh, I didn't know that. So it's been, yeah, it's been a lot of discovery, but yeah, at first it was just a lot of just question asking and trying to figure out what is working. I didn't want to reinvent the wheel if I didn't need to necessarily. And I mean, at this point, everything has changed, but I did everything also in kind of like waves. I also didn't want to like completely disrupt the way that customers were used to getting, their customer experience and the customer
Right.
support. I didn't want to super change that too much and then be like, whoa, like, how do I get help now? I don't understand this. So it's been a lot of, iterations of the same thing, just getting progressively better.
So you sort of undertook new tools. You built out a bunch of processes for both current and new folks who joined your team. You've created content in a bunch of approaches. Can you tell me a little bit about, what's it like from after you've built out some of these processes? How do you kind of keep your team enthusiastic and at the same time focused on what is often, I think, people don't really appreciate how difficult customer support is. Like you have some of the hardest interactions with people. They're annoyed and frustrated. And then also you have some of the best, right? How do you kind of keep people enthusiastic, excited, motivated to help ensure the company hits their goals, but also for them as people?
Yeah. Yeah. First and foremost, yeah, customer support, I think, is one of the most undervalued teams. And it's not specific to anyone in particular. I'm very thankful that Vitally is not part of that culture. Our team, like our CEO is constantly like, you guys are killing it. Like we are very acknowledged, but yeah, it is really, really difficult because I mean, most times, you're dealing with customers that are unhappy, that are like, hey, this isn't working. I'm trying to figure this out. I'm like, I can't do it. And like, that doesn't allow you to do your job and focus on what is important and is reaching that goal. It's kind of like a blocker. And so that can be really draining for, whether it's just your patience, your frustration, your mental health. It could definitely be really, really draining. So customer support is definitely not for everybody. But one of the ways that we really try to keep our culture is number one thing is team. Everybody has to get along. I don't need you guys to be best friends, but we are here together. And so we're going to act as if we are on the team together. So there's a lot of unity, and something that I'm very known for is kind of like that culture champion. I think it just makes such a huge difference to actually be like, oh wait, you guys are humans. Right. Let me treat you like such. And so it's, something that I think most people, we get so focused on the business that we forget that there are humans that are actually getting us to those business goals. And so my team feels, it's so funny. We're like in the middle of doing reviews and I've started to kind of read a little bit of some our upward reviews of what my team is saying. And it's great that they feel like anything that they say to me, I'm their champion. I will always be like, okay, cool. Like, this is what you want. Let's think this through. What makes sense on the business side? And then let's also, try to see how we can accommodate that to whatever it is that your concern is. So one, making them feel heard is super important because there are going to be times where something isn't working. Maybe they think that they have a better idea or something. And so it's just talking through. It's like a soundboard. I'm like, okay, come to me with your idea. We'll talk this out loud. I'll give you my opinion, you'll give me yours, and then we'll see where we can find like the middle ground here. Does it make sense to change the process? Does it make sense to just leave it as is, given the context that I've provided you? Number two, another thing that we do that's really big is we do a lot of like working sessions together, and it's mainly because we are a remote first company, and so most of us are everywhere. We have team members based right outside of London, and then we have the rest of the team that's based in the US. And so we try to at some point get together and actually like work together and teach each other certain things and keep each other just kind of updated on everything that's going on. And we have a team channel. And in that team channel, we talk about all kinds of things. If there's something really cool that happened over the weekend, it's really nice because they will actually just like just post like, hey, like this is what I did this weekend. And it's nice because then it's like, oh, like I know this thing about you and this thing that you did. And that human connection is just, it's really makes the biggest difference in all of that. And so it's a lot of just remembering that we are humans, and the collaboration and partnership is really, really rooted in our human connection to each other. And so it's just fostering a lot of that.
Oh, well, I absolutely agree. I especially love the focus on the human connection. And it's especially hard when, effectively what we're often reduced to is a name in a Slack channel. It's pretty tough for your username in a intercom or something. So that's great. I love how you're thinking about this. So I imagine that a lot of these ideas, these leadership approaches didn't sort of just come to you over time. You've worked in a bunch of different areas, retail, e-commerce, tech. Have you found that working across these different industries have really contributed to how you think about some of these problems? Like, were other companies not maybe where you learn some of the hard lessons of like, oh, actually we don't want to do it this way, or oh, actually this is a great approach to how we should do things?
Yeah. First and foremost, and this is what I tell my team all the time, we are not saving lives. Okay. So while I understand that, these are people's businesses and money is behind this, everything will be okay. Like no one is in danger. Like, unless you are in, I don't know, in law or medical or something, which we are not, everything will be fine. And working in retail, I worked in retail for about 10 years, and I made it to be an assistant store manager for a big flagship store that made an insane amount of money. And oh my gosh, I was so young. I was probably like 23, right, or 24 when I made it to assistant store manager.
Wow.
And the first thing that I really learned was just like, yeah, I'm just not going to take any of this too seriously, because like this is a material thing. You don't need this. Like there are things that are out there that are far worse. And so like this little thing, like it'll be okay. And most times customers just want to vent. That's really, they just want to be able to be like, I'm really frustrated about this. I really don't like this. And then once they get those feelings out, it's like they're just got it off their chest, and now we can actually get into like solutions mode. And so retail really, really put a thick skin on me. And it just kind of taught me like, you know what, even at the worst of times during holidays when it is absolute chaos, when I'm getting up at 4:00 in the morning to be at the store at 5 a.m. to open up at 6 a.m. to like, there's just so many different things going on. Like everything will be okay. It will 100% be okay. And so retail definitely taught me the most about the human connection and the customer experience. As soon as I stayed calm and I never took it personally, I was a much happier person, and I was a much better manager for it. And over the years, as the other industries that I've been in, it really, the rest of that really solidified everything that I learned in retail. And it started to also, some of the things that I started to learn were about documentation and organization, and like how that was going to help myself. And I always say this is super morbid, and I'm like, if there's a day where I die, who's going to be able to do my job? And I love the people that I work with, and I always want to make sure that they're prepared. Like, what if I'm out sick, or what if I get a new opportunity? Maybe I won't die. Maybe something else will happen that's a
Oh,
little bit
I
better.
feel like the hopefulness around not dying is pretty, I'm sure not now, not for a while, right? But eventually,
Yeah.
eventually.
Oh, but it's my funny way of just being like, guys, like, what if I die tomorrow? Like, how are you going to know to do this? And it usually gets a good laugh. But yeah, it's just really a lot of how can I prepare everybody else to be their best selves, because not everything can live in my brain. It needs to live somewhere else. And so also, I'm not being bothered all day by questions like, how do we do this? Like, what's this process? It's like, here's a place where you can find all of the questions or all the answers to your questions. Probably the thing that I've probably learned most over the years.
I love it. I think especially, I really resonate with the experience working in retail. I was a cashier, a bagger at a grocery store in my hometown. I worked at Nordstrom Men's Shoes for like the world's leader in shoe sales. And it was incredible how he approached customer conversations and his huge Rolodex. And I made cold calls for him. And he really, truly cared about it. But also at the same time, there were folks who took it like way too seriously. And sometimes I was like, I get that this is your livelihood, but yeah, I love that. So tell me a little bit about, thinking about customer support. Obviously, like there's the human part, and there's also sort of like the metrics driven outcomes, CSAT, all that great stuff. What have you seen as far as what are the right things to implement from a tracking and metrics perspective? And how have you been able to help your team be successful in those areas? What are some of those secrets?
Yeah, I think CSAT is something that is important, but is looked at incorrectly. I had a manager and recently, and she kind of just changed the way that I viewed CSAT completely. And maybe everybody knows this, and maybe I'm just the last to know. I don't know. But she said, I will never hold one person accountable for CSAT. It is a team metric. It is not an individual metric. And I kind of looked at her and I was like, wait, why? Like, what do you mean? And she was like, well, and she looked at me and she was like, I will hold me as their manager accountable for CSAT, but I will never hold each individual person accountable for their CSAT. And I was like, interesting. And so I asked, I was like, what, like, why? That doesn't make any sense to me. I'm thinking CSAT and, and obviously there are times where like, if there's CSAT that's consistent with like, wow, this person is just terrible at their job. Of course, please hold accountable that person, because that's, you cannot get more explicit. But in SaaS, and maybe other companies, I don't know, CSAT is, most of the negative CSAT is not actually based off of the customer experience, but it's usually based off of the product. I'm upset that I wasn't able to do this because your product didn't allow me to, And so I was like, oh my God, duh, that totally makes sense. Like, yeah, why would I hold a person that has literally nothing to do with building the product accountable for negative CSAT? And so that made a lot of sense for me. And then I was like, well, why would you hold me? I'm no coder. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I'm barely that technical in comparison to some of my team members. And she was like, well, as manager, as voice of the customer, you have the ability to influence the roadmap and to be like, hey, product team, we're getting this consistent feedback of this one tool not doing this one thing, and customers are getting really frustrated. She's like, that's a data point that you can present to influence the roadmap. I've since, like, for a while now, been doing product reporting and just like voice of the customer stuff, and it's been super helpful. So that's the one thing for CSAT that I recently learned. I will say, first reply time, I hate that metric. I hate it so much, because it creates this sense of quantity over quality, which, nope, no thank you. I don't care if your first reply time is under an hour if all you're saying is, I'll look into this. I like that. For me, I'm like, cool. now? Like, where's the answer? Like, how long am I going to, it's the responses after that make the biggest difference for me. So it's not first reply time for me. It's just response time and overall kind of like handle time, right? And handle time specifically to tickets that are not being escalated to engineering, because we have no control over handle time once something goes off to engineering. But that for me is more consistent with, okay, well, I'm always going to assume that my team is doing the best that they can. And if the team overall, if they're averaging about the same, then something else is going on. Maybe what we're looking into is product related. Maybe there's just like a way that we can surface things in the UI for customers to self-serve a little bit better. Maybe it's like we can't find certain data and we need an internal tool to be able to help us more efficiently troubleshoot certain areas. And that's where I start off with, and then I kind of go down of like, okay, well, is it a team member thing, or is it one team member that's really like taking down handle time, or is it just everyone is generally around the same time? So for me, I hate first reply time. I cannot stand any company that is like, you need to do this amount of tickets per day. That never helps the customer, ever. Like, it literally only makes all your support people rush through tickets, and then all you're doing is just numbers, but they never actually get solutions to these customers because they can't take their time and actually provide quality work. My big thing is I want this customer to ask this question once, and I never want them to come back with the question ever again. That's the goal. I want you to ask this once, and then I don't want you back in the queue unless it's something else. But that's it. That's my biggest goal with everybody. So I'm like, sit there and explain to them why this is happening, how they can fix it, and potential workarounds in the case that they want to, think like long term. We have a couple of different features that the solution looks very differently short term versus long term. And so we want to ask like, okay, what's your ultimate goal here? Like, how do you see this happening? And then we start to think about, okay, this is your solution. Also keep in mind X, Y, and Z. If any of this is relevant to you, let me know so we can provide you even more solutions. And that's the way that we think about our support team. And we thankfully have a very, very good reputation with our customers. And I think that's honestly one of the biggest reasons.
So from what we were just saying, sort of like, I feel like in improv, they have this idea of like yes and. So like you answer the question, you provide a little bit of extra.
Yeah.
Is that sort of kind of what you're saying here is like, obviously you'll answer the immediate question, but you'll try to look for anything that might also be there to sort of point out?
Yeah. I mean, I think when customers ask a question, they're thinking about that moment. They're not thinking about the future. It is up to us, the product experts, to know that. It is up to us to anticipate those needs, because, we see them all the time. The same questions are going to be asked over and over and over and over again by different customers. And so those trends, that like repetitiveness, should teach you, oh, you know what? Every time a customer asks me about this one thing, they're probably going to actually encounter all of these other like potential workflows or branches, let's call them. And so it is kind of that. It's like, it is that very much like yes and, like, we should be able to anticipate the customer needs, because ultimately we know the product way better than a customer. Yeah. Or else a customer probably wouldn't be in the chat asking like, hey, how do I do this one thing?
And have you found, speaking of knowing the product best, have you found that defining roles for your team or kind of identifying specialties has helped make the team even more effective? Or is everybody sort of a generalist?
Yeah, so we definitely run on more of like the generalist, because we can't run any other way. We're a very small team, but we do have SMEs, so subject matter expert. And so the way that we handle that is like the documentation is owned. Certain features are owned by certain people. And so like that's kind of like the point of contact. If there's like an update or a product is doing something, or product needs feedback, they're like, hey, we're thinking about making this update. Like, who can we ask? They have that go-to person where they are able to be like, okay, I probably know this feature a little bit more than the rest of the team. I can give you some potential ideas or, just feedback or some data or whatever the case may be. But we definitely, for the most part, we are pretty generalist. And when it comes to our product knowledge, the way that I hire is typically I try to have people that are very, very technical, because we are very integrations heavy. And so it's a lot of data and, anywhere from like we connect from Salesforce to like API and Segment and data warehouses. And, so it's a level of, as a technical level is kind of different. So I try very hard to kind of make it even where in the US and in EMEA, we have at least one very technical person. So if the team is like, oh God, S3, oh, I really don't know how to do this, they can turn to somebody and go like, hey, can you just help me like look through this ticket just so I can, know how to answer, and also for them to learn as well. But yeah, big blurb for that simple question. Sorry.
I think it's great. I think we talk to a lot of companies who have huge customer support teams that is really specialized, multiple tiers, and then also we talk to smaller customer support teams who they kind of have to be able to handle all the scenarios. So I think it's like you really pointed out very very clearly that documentation, process, and escalation paths are super important there. Kind of a question that goes back to one of the things that you talked about earlier, which was with your team and trying to define the community and like having them talk about, their week or their sort of weekend. One of the things I noticed on LinkedIn is you have this passion for community building, particularly in the Latin community. What's that about? How much, like, what are some of the areas that you get excited about? Like, what are you hoping to kind of accomplish there?
Yeah. So I am an immigrant. I was born in Colombia. I came to the US when I was 7, and I lived in New York pretty much my entire life. I've lived in other states, but New York has definitely been the one that I've lived in the most. And I there's a lot of, and there's a lot of things on like LinkedIn that I post about that I'm like open about. And so if anyone is like, whoa, what does that mean? You can go ahead and, try to scavenge all of those posts. But everyone talks about like the American dream and why so many immigrant families move to the US, and it's really just to give their children an opportunity to be successful. And I feel like I am able, like I'm living this American dream. I went to college and then I dropped out after a year. I don't have a degree. I am not here because I have a degree. And it took me a very long time to figure out what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. And I thought retail was kind of like the only thing that it was available to me, because most of the job postings that I saw were like, you have to have a bachelor's degree. You need to have like all these degrees and all this experience. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't have any of that. So I just kind of just like, all right, well, I mean, I'm just going to stick to what I'm doing and what I know, and maybe I'll make it to like district manager. And that was my goal for a really long time. Hence why I became an assistant store manager. Like, I think I was like 24, 25. I don't know. I have no idea how old I was. But at that point, I got to a point where I was like, this is just way too much. Like, I don't want to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning during the holidays. This is insane. And so I was just like, well, maybe somebody else would just give me an opportunity. And I was given that. I kept getting opportunity after opportunity without a college degree, without having really any connections, because it's not like I really knew anybody other than my family. And so I'm at a point where I feel like I am successful by my standards. I have a good paying job. I'm stable. I have the ability to help my family. I have the ability to pay my dog's bills that are sometimes insane. Thank goodness for pet insurance. But like, that stability is something that I think everyone is after. But it's, I think for people like me, it can be a little bit different. Our experiences are just a little bit different. And so I wanted to just give back. I see and I mean zero disrespect by this, but like a lot of companies, we see white men in leadership positions. We don't see enough women. We don't see enough women of color in leadership. Even I recently was even searching into career coaches, and I think it's like a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of Latin women that are career coaches. It is primarily, predominantly white men that are in career coaches. And, for me, for a long time, I was looking for a mentor, and I had a really hard time. And I spoke to so many people, and there's so many smart people out there. Like, your gender and your background really, like, for the most part, I've learned from everybody from all over the place. But for me to enhance my career, there are certain experiences that I have experienced that other people may have not. And so I really wanted to find somebody that could connect with me and really help me through those types of obstacles, and to kind of heal from some of these things, as well as somebody that probably understood where I was coming from. And so through my own experience of like, I really can't find a mentor that I just like really connect with, where I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, like I can be open with you and you're not going like, whoa, someone said what to you? Like, that's crazy. And it's like, it's not crazy. It actually happens pretty often. So I really wanted to give back and find and just provide that mentorship, not just me being the mentor, but I wanted to find other Latinas to be able to mentor other Latinas and be like, how can I help you take up more space? Because that's really what it is. Like, there is enough space for everyone. We just need a little bit more women and women of color in those spaces, in those rooms. Diversity is really important because it really creates a sense of like, let's think of everything from every angle, and our lived experiences really make a huge difference. So I think it really rooted from that. And I think anyone who is an immigrant will, I think it's really interesting. I thought I was the only one that felt this, but talking to more Latinas, it's a stereotype of like, we carry this guilt that is like, I'm successful and maybe my parents aren't as successful, or other Latinas that I'm friends with aren't as successful. There's just this like guilt, and it's crazy because I shouldn't feel guilty for being successful. My mom literally brought me here for this. But through that, I was like, okay, well, I have this feeling, what can I do with it? And so I started to partner up with Amiga Latinas, and I got really close with the founder. And since we've tried to really provide a lot of professional development, and we've partnered up with a plethora of other Latinas, and it's been really, really awesome to kind of hear from them, and it's inspirational as well to kind of be like, whoa, like you did all of this, like that's crazy, like I can do that. And it's really awesome to see.
So just to come back, you mentioned, it sounded like the name of an organization or a group.
Yes. Yeah. So the group that I do a lot of this with is called Amigas Latinas. There's a huge social media following. The social media Instagram has just been a lot for the founder. So that's kind of been a little bit on pause, but super active on LinkedIn though. And Danny, the founder, is a phenomenal human being. She is very young, and I'm like, girl, I have no idea how you're doing any of this, plus your full-time job. So Amigas Latinas, you can find them on LinkedIn. There's a public one, and then there's also a private group where it's a little bit more like Danny and I are trying to get more services out there for other Latinas.
And for anybody who's maybe listening, like, are you comfortable usually with folks just like pinging you on LinkedIn and asking direct questions?
Oh,
or do you prefer going to the group?
Yeah, for sure. I get a lot of messages on pretty much every day from a variety of people, and I'm always happy to respond. I will be the person that even responds to people who are trying to sell me things, just because like I know that you're using one of those like premium things, and I'm like, oh, like you're wasted this message on me. I have to respond. So I will respond to pretty much anybody on LinkedIn. So if there's anyone that has any questions or, any resources or anything that I can point you in the right direction, I'm more than happy to.
I love it. I love that you're willing to kind of like understand what it took to get you from where you were to where you are now, and then the willingness to help other people. I think that's in some industries not super common, and then in others it's even more common. So I love that you're willing to help. So speaking of, the type of messages we're getting on LinkedIn, I get a lot too. Some of them are from real people, and I swear most of them now are like AI. You're starting to see a lot of tools. Intercom is one of them. They have a new one called Fin, where there's this AI tooling in customer support tools. How have you seen this help you, help your team? And what do you feel like other customer support leaders should be doing to prepare for these types of tools and products?
Yeah. Number one, be responsible. AI is not replacement for support. You just can't, you can never, ever literally just replace human support with a computer. It just cannot be done. You lose that human aspect. You use honestly common sense, because the computer does not have a common sense. It doesn't. So do it responsibly, first and foremost. When it comes to AI, it's been super helpful. I mean, like, I think aside from Fin, we actually just signed on to get Copilot as well with Intercom, which is a Copilot. We get to ask it questions where it's like, why would this happen to, whatever feature? And it's cool because it not only gets information from our external documentation and internal documentation but also from past conversations, which past conversations is it is gold right there. You are most times answering the same question over and over again. And so for AI to look at that historical context, phenomenal. So for us, it's been super helpful to kind of just really get like that low hanging fruit. Or my whole process in AI is I want customers that have these like really easy how-to questions to be able to get those answers within minutes or seconds. And then really what the support team should be handling is more of those like really complex types of issues, because now we're just kind of letting go of like the super easy, like, how do I add this one thing here? And it's like, oh, just press this button. Versus some of like the other really meaty types of questions that we get. And, a lot of support teams, I always think that support is like a stepping stone for a lot of careers, whether you want to go into customer success, whether you want to be a solutions architect, or sometimes you want to be an engineer. And support is a really, really good place to kind of like start. I know a lot of people that started in support and are now directors of product marketing, are now product managers. And like, there's just been so many different types of paths that people take, and they all started within support. So it's been super helpful to kind of be able to not have to answer these very simple questions that may take us like a few minutes, but those few minutes that we could really be focusing on like the more complex issues, the ones that we're actually learning a lot more and we're actually making a difference in the product, where it's like, oh my God, yeah, you're right. Like, this messaging totally does not make sense. Let me go ahead, go into product and like let them know. That's what makes a difference in customers' everyday's lives. It's not the, hey, how do I add a user again? And it's like, press these 3 buttons. And, like, AI can do that. Like, let AI kind of handle those. And then we can go back to more of like the complex and theoretical, like, I have this really wonderful idea I want to automate. I'm trying to do X, Y, and Z. And then I want like, just all of those types of ideas that you need a human being to kind of talk back and forth with. So it's been super helpful. We love it. We are trying constantly to empower it to AI to just do more for us. Because even if it doesn't respond to your question, maybe it'll get you halfway there. And then you can go, oh, okay, so that makes sense. Now I have a follow-up question where maybe now human support can jump into. So we're not starting from, step 1, maybe we're at step 5, and that's already getting the support team ahead and you ahead as a customer to be able to get to whatever goal that it is you're trying to do.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm hearing from a lot of different roles, frankly, is as opposed to replacing your team, they're supplementing, enhancing, making your team, it's sort of like the difference between AI replacing just with robots versus like helping us become RoboCop or something like that, just empowered with technology, which is super cool. That's great. Maybe, and then just, one final question for you that, this is more just like a fun question, but you mentioned that you're a unserious, serious person. And I've seen on this conversation today, even like where, you clearly care about your community, your team, the reputation of your product with your customers, but also like there's a lot of energy and enthusiasm and fun that's there. So how do you play that, and how do you balance it into your leadership style?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting thing to be a millennial. I think that really has a lot to do with my managing style. I can't tell you how many times I've been on like Instagram, just like scrolling, and there's a lot of like your millennial manager types
Yep.
of videos, and I'm like, wow, I feel so seen. Like maybe I'm not as like goofy as that, but like 100% like totally relevant. But yeah, I mean, I think it just goes back to like I'm not going to take this too seriously because like we're not saving lives. So like everything will be okay, I promise. But also it's the balance between like, let's like here, we're here for like 40 hours. That's a lot of time. And so I want to have time. I want to have a fun time in the meantime. But I also want to make sure that we're getting our job done, because what I don't want to happen is for someone to get upset, or for senior leadership to be like, what's going on? Like, you guys aren't like performing well, because then that cuts into the fun time. And so I'm like,
Totally.
Let's have fun, but like, let's also just make sure that we are going towards these goals. And if we're not, like, we're all holding each other accountable. And I think my team, I've created this culture of like, yeah, you can totally like have fun and make jokes. And, like even our support, when we talk to customers, we use GIFs all the time. Like they're fun, and they're, that like unserious serious. We're like, we're going to help you with your problem no matter what. We're just going to throw in like a couple of different GIFs in there. Like I remember I threw in like a Keanu Reeves GIF, and the customer was like, I really appreciate that. Like I like, thank you so much. And
Is this sad Keanu eating a sandwich, Keanu, or is this a different one?
I can't remember exactly which one it was. And
He's
honestly,
got so many great ones.
so many good ones. But it's like those things, like even when I'm like, hey, like, can you try clearing your cache and cookies? Like the most IT response. Have you tried turning it off and on? Like, and when like that doesn't work, like sometimes I'll be like, oh, rats. And like those like little things where it's like, we're here to help you, but like, let's also remember that like we can laugh and have fun in the meantime and kind of just make light of this, but still get you to the end of your goal. And so I really try hard to just make fun of things. I think comedy is a really good way of keeping sane, honestly. But always ensuring that like, the business is there and top of mind at all times. And so it's just really finding that balance.
I think that's great. The idea of having fun and then getting it done sounds great. So Laura, thanks for joining us today, and great having you.
Yeah, thank you.